Finally, I've got some time to sit down and make another video here. One of the most common questions asked after my last couple of videos on using AI in 3D art was how to make an object that was more complex than, the alien egg subject that I'd been using. Something like a character, for example, and I've had some ideas on that. And as ever, the pace of AI technology is really hard to keep up with. It's just thundering along at the moment, but I'm going to try and create a 3D character in this video using synthetic data. Is this going to be ready to drop into Unreal as your main player character or even as an NPC? Probably not, but it may have some uses as a background character or a crowd character, just as long as you can't get too close to it to see the issues. Um, it will only really work well from limited angles, at least using the simpler technique that we're going to explore in this video. So in real time, we're going to use Midjourney, we're going to use PIFuHD, we're going to use Photoshop, we're going to use 3ds Max, and we're going to use Mixamo to generate an animated 3D background character. So the links to those will be in the description. So let's crack on. So what you're looking at here is a selection of characters that I made in Midjourney version 5. And some of them look like they belong to the same world, that they, could be part of a gang of stalkers or something like that. One looks like an action figure, and some of them just have nice moods or nice contrast about them. So in particular, I'm going to look at this one here. Now, the proportions aren't perfect here, but what I like about this one is that it's not quite a front angle. It's kind of a 3/4 angle, and that actually helps us a little bit when it comes to texturing a little bit later on. So trying to find a suitable character pose can be difficult just using Midjourney. Like there's Plask and there's other techniques for using pose-driven AI to generate characters. Like ideally for something like this, for a character, we need a T pose or an A pose. The more you prompt, I've found, for characters in a T pose, the less realistic your results become. It's almost because a T pose or an A pose, it's an unnatural kind of a pose for a human. You don't find it out there, so you probably don't get that many photographs on the internet. And where you do find images of characters in a T pose, it's usually from a 3D asset pack of characters that are, ready to be rigged or whatever. So that's something to bear in mind with this. You are going to be limited. So to help my prompt generation, I looked in the Midjourney public channels and I copied and pasted some prompts from there straight out and just kind of tailored it a little bit to my needs. So for this particular character, I have Manara style DSLR photograph shot on X11 to 16 millimeter f/2.8 Pro DX pastel watercolor, full body sci-fi female stalker hero from front, character on the left, standing on a plinth, head looking at the camera, blue eyes, gas mask, tight jacket, tight tattered clothes, armed with Soviet machine gun, sci-fi desolated scenery, fog after battle, destroyed tanks and vehicles and background. There's even a typo in there. High detail, high contrast, epic light, full body shot. Then the aspect ratio is 9:16. Stylized value is 300. Quality is 3, and the version of Midjourney is version 5. Now, version 5 seems to prefer these kind of verbose descriptions rather than being kind of too detailed. So this was what we ended up with. And again, there are some slight issues with proportions, and there are a couple of areas that might cause us bother. But let's see how to prepare this for best to use with PIFuHD. PIFuHD is a Google Colab notebook that is going to take a 2D image, a single 2D image, usually a photograph, and turn it into a 3D model as best it can. So let's see what we can do to kind of help that along. So let's jump into Photoshop and see what we can do here. Just going to check the image dimensions here, and we're at 1024 by 576. That's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to change the canvas size. Well, let's make it a bit bigger like this. I just want to kind of square it off. So I'm going to hold Shift on my crop tool and make sure that I'm cropping it into a square image like this. PIFuHD prefers a square image, and we'll do some cropping as well. So we're going to try and limit the amount of cropping that PIFuHD will do. So the next thing we want to do is just kind of clone out this appendage here on the back. We don't really need that too much. And I will also just try and help the outline a bit. Dark areas and images don't work well with PIFuHD. So let's go ahead up here and go select subject. And hopefully this will select most of the area we have. That was quick, and it has, but it hasn't really defined out the boot. So I'm going to actually do that by hand a little bit. And zoom in here. I'm also going to hold Alt and just kind of very roughly make sure that this gap here is not included in the selection. Okay, so what I can probably do here then is also just kind of trace over the outline of the hand there, and that should be fine. That will exclude the container in the back there. Let's have a look up top. Nothing really to do there, I think. That's all pretty good. So it's really just defining the boots a little bit better. So let's get rid of this and get rid of this. And I'm just holding Alt to remove from the selection. Now these kind of boots is something that I've seen PIFuHD struggle with. I guess it's all down to the training data. And it seems to be trained on kind of fashion models and you know, as the further you drift away into kind of sci-fi characters or loose clothes, the more an issue it will have. And sometimes you'll have fabulous images going in and they just will come out as garbage, kind of multi-limbed creatures. Okay, you know, I think that's going to do it. So what I'm going to do now is just copy that selection onto a new layer, Control C, Control V, and I'm going to flood the background here with white. Okay, so we have our character isolated against a white background. We've excluded the couple of areas that we weren't happy with. Let's crack on with this. So I'm going to save this as female stalker 01, and that's going to be a JPEG. All right, that's going to do us. We can then go over to PIFuHD and check it out. So here we are on the PIFuHD demo Google Colab notebook. So the benefit of having a Google Colab notebook like this is that you don't need a PC or a laptop with a beefy GPU to run this stuff. You're running on a computer in the cloud. So once you have like a Google account, a Gmail account, you can access these collabs, and it kind of simplifies, you know, this whole process a great deal. So on the PIFuHD demo webpage, the first thing you want to do is connect up here. Now I'm already logged in with my Gmail address, so this should be hopefully pretty quick and painless. And we're connected. Great. So how this works is that there are a number of cells usually that are snippets of code that run one after the other in sequence. And you know, by kind of doing it like that, it's useful to try and work out where stuff went wrong, because occasionally there are external dependencies that won't download to the cloud computer that you're working on and will cause bother here. But for this, you can kind of skip past these tutorials here, which are useful, but in this interest of speed, let's just skip them. So I'm going to just highlight this here, clone PIFuHD repository. Now this is not going to install anything locally on your PC. This is going to be on the cloud computer that you're working on. So with this selected, I'm going to go to runtime and I'm going to go run after, and you can hit Control F10 on Windows as a shortcut for that. You'll get a warning that this notebook wasn't authored by Google. If you're happy enough with that, you can hit run anyway. And you'll see that these cells start to kind of run here. And the active cell has this little rotating buffering thing here. So this is the only time you'll have to interact with it after this, other than downloading the end result. So you want to choose the file that you saved, which is our female stalker 01, hit open, and you will see that that gets loaded onto the virtual computer to work with. And you can follow these cells as they execute. It all should happen pretty quickly. Okay, so we can preview this little movie here and see how our character turned out. There are a couple of issues when working with synthetic images. Very often they can look okay, but the perspective is actually off, and that will be picked up when it comes to making this into a kind of a 3D model. So there are no crazy floating geometry bits in space. You know, the head looks a little bit large, like it's kind of a large hood or something like that. But you know, there's a back and there's a front, and you know, I think there's something here that we can work with. So to go ahead and to download this OBJ, you can open up the folders over here, and if you browse to PIFuHD results, PIFuHD final, and then recon, which is reconstruction, presumably. If I open this up over, you'll see we've got an MP4, which is the MP4 that's playing in the browser. You've got the PNG, which is the pixel data used to help generate this, and you've got the OBJ. So just hit the three little dots here and hit download, and that's going to download your OBJ. And if you want to see what the PNG looks like as well, you can download that too. Okay, cool. So let's take a look at what we got. So back over to 3D Studio Max, and I mean, this could be any modeler, it could be Maya, it could be Blender, C4D, whatever it is you're using. All we're going to be doing here is a little bit of mesh editing, maybe some symmetry, and a little bit of UV projection as well. So this should be easy enough to recreate in the model of your choice. Let's go ahead and import the OBJ that was created on PIFuHD. I'm just going to hit the default import here. Okay, so let's see what we actually got. We can see from this angle, which is kind of like the angle that the AI image was generated from, it looks pretty good, but as soon as we rotate the camera, it starts getting blurry and kind of Elephant Man-like. And I mean, it's not done a bad job at kind of filling in the detail that couldn't be seen, but it's not without its issues. So let's see about cleaning it up a little bit and making it a little bit better. Here you can see this is kind of the standard, I guess, nerf style kind of topology that you get a lot from these kind of AI services. But we're going to retopologize it anyway, so let's not worry too much about that for now. The first thing we got to do is just scale it up. So if we measure it, you can see the X, Y, and Z parameters here are very, very small. So let's take it up to about, I don't know, 1.7 meters. Yeah, something like that's pretty good. I'm going to hit reset transform and move it up here onto the origin. Okay, cool. So the next thing I'm going to do is, and I'm doing this a particular way just to facilitate the few changes that we might have to do, is I'm going to create a plane. And the plane is going to be kind of around the same height here. So let's go 1.8 by 1.8. Okay. And let's go back into default shading mode. And then pressing M to bring up the material editor here, I am going to load in the texture that was created by PIFuHD, female stalker 01, and apply that on there. And what I'm going to do then is I'm going to just give this a different color. There we go. And I'm going to put this in behind our character and just then adjust it as best I can. So I can do this maybe with an FFD or editing vertices. Let's just pull that down. And it's okay if there's a little halo around the outside of the character. It will actually stop that white background from bleeding around too much. Okay. So you can line this up by whatever method you see fit. Okay, I think that's going to do it. I think it's going to be fine. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is add a UVW modifier to this plane. Now it already has it built in, and adding the UVW map modifier is not going to change anything. It just lets us set up the next step. Okay, so with our model selected, let's collapse it down to an editable poly, and let's also add a UVW map modifier. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the coordinates of the plane behind and transfer them to the 3D model here. So let's go ahead and apply the texture we've set up. Let's call this material Stalker. Apply that on. And under the UVW map rollout, if we go down to acquire, we can click on the object behind it because it already has a UVW map modifier and hit acquire absolute and OK. And that has taken the UV map from here and transferred it to the one on front. Okay, so as long as that UVW map is on the top of our stack, we can make changes to the geometry here, and it won't be, it will update the UVs as we go. Okay, so let's hide this a sec and see what we've got now. So again, this looks pretty good from this point of view, but it's just when you start to get into the off angles, you can see the planar projection being kind of stretched along the edges, and then when we get to this side, it's just pretty crazy. So we're going to try and keep the best bits and lose the worst bits and see if we can do some sort of animation here. Okay, so something that's caught my eye here is this gas mask here, and it's kind of blobby and kind of weird and doesn't look right. And like I said, with gas masks and with sunglasses and with caps and with headphones and even things with scarves, the further you stray away from the type of data that PIFuHD has been trained with, which is kind of tight-fitting fashion photography type images, you're going to have issues. It just won't know where to put the geometry. So for the gas mask canister here, I'm just going to use a cylinder. I'm going to turn on auto grid, and I'm just going to place it kind of about here, and that's going to go backwards up into the head there like that. And you might want to preserve kind of headphones here as well. And I'm going to push them right up into the head as well. Okay, cool. So I want to retopologize this, and in order for it to retopologize properly, I kind of want it to be a closed mesh. So I'm going to use Booleans to add these two pieces of geometry in here. Okay, so let's go ahead to compound objects. Let's choose Pro Boolean, start picking, and it's a union that we want here. So let's pick to add that in, pick to add that in as well. Okay, so those are now part of the mesh, and there's a little bit of overlap here, but I don't think that's going to kill us. So let's collapse it back down again. Add the UVW map modifier. As before, we can acquire it from the object behind us, and that prevents us from having to go ahead and to, you know, unwrap the headphones separately or anything like that. It's not perfect, but it's definitely better than what it was. You can see that the definition is better there. And because the this sits in a modifier, we could go back down underneath the stack, and if we want to, we could actually do a little bit more here. We've got a little bit of extra geo there to contend with, but hopefully it won't be an issue. Hold shift. And that's slightly more. It's this here. You see, we can collapse this little area here. And then we should be able to pull that in. Okay, so there's a few issues because of the geometry caused by the Boolean, but that's okay. It's still not gonna hurt this. Or you could maybe bevel the edges here if you wanted to. Okay, so that's a small amount of cleanup being done there. So let's say we want to take this further. I mean, if you just want a character you can place in your background, a static character, or maybe something that you 3D print it. I mean, it's not great for 3D printed, but you could do it. You can stop watching right now. You're done. If you want to take it a little bit further, you can stay tuned. So I'm just going to make a copy of this, and I'm going to rotate it so that we're kind of looking at it from a front view or something close to a front view. Something like that is not terrible. It's a bit weird because of the direction that she's looking in. So you can see that there's proportion issues here and stuff like that. But look, let's just crack on with it anyway, see what we can pull out of it. So what I want to do is I'm going to reset the transform here again, just because I've rotated it. And I'm going to use the symmetry modifier. And we're going to symmetry on X. And as you can see, we get some kind of funky results there, but it should be okay once we pull that in a bit, okay, so I mean, it's very goofy looking at the top here. It definitely is. There's no two ways about it. But maybe there's some corrections that we can do. So we can keep the symmetry modifier there where we are, um, and we can see about trying to actually, do you know what I should do before we go any further with this is just simplify this entire mesh. And to simplify the entire mesh, I'm going to just retopo this. I'm going to give us something nicer to work with, maybe 10,000 polys, which will give us 20,000 tries. I want to keep the UV channel. I'm not too bothered with smoothing groups, and just hit compute. So retopo is complete. It has preserved the UV channel here. And you can see we have a greatly simplified mesh to work with. Now, it's still not perfect, but it was never going to be. All right, so let's go ahead and convert that to an editable poly, and we can add our symmetry modifier back on. Okay, and let's just get this using the texture as close to looking reasonable as possible. Something like that is not terribly bad. What we do need to do, I think, is to just work on the head a little bit. It seems oversized or an awkward angle or something like that. So soft selection is your friend here. Again, this topology is hideous for a character for the most part, but hopefully we can just fix it enough that it won't look terribly out of place in the background. Okay, and of course we have the issue of, textures being mirrored because of the symmetry that we've added in there. But you could always add a second UV channel, bake all this out to a nice UV layout, take it into Painter and paint over it if that's what you wanted to do. But the whole thing here is about getting quick results, and we will have on the back we will have kind of the same issues as we had before. But a good way to hide this would be, I mean, she's got a lot of kind of straps on here. So you could put a backpack on that would hide it. It would also kind of cover up the lack of a proper hood at the back there. Or what I like to do sometimes just to add a little bit, just to remove the symmetry, is to use like a cloth brush, like Polycloth or the Clothify modifier, which are paid plugins, but they're also super useful for stuff like this, for adding kind of organic complexity in there. Okay, so if we could compare this now to the kind of proportions of a biped, let's say, that would be similar sized, you can see that the arms are probably a bit long. I guess there's an argument maybe that her hands don't fill the gloves completely, like the gloves are oversized, but it still should be okay to work with. So let's get rid of that for reference. The only thing I might do up here is, I mean, it's not terrible, but we could add a little bit more definition to the profile of the nose. It's very weak here, even for kind of a background character. So we could definitely make that kind of a bit more prominent, especially as it's kind of cumbersome, breathing apparatus. All right, let's also add, I can see that we've got an extra element down here. So should have deleted this first really, but there's some tiny little polygons down there that shouldn't be there. So let's just select the invert and delete those out. Texturing issues aside along here, let's go ahead and see if we can fix this up for animation a little better. So a quick fix for what's happening with that white would be to maybe do a little bit of content aware fill around this, because it's the white background that's really bleeding in there. So why don't we try that very quickly? Just get the magic wand tool here, and we want it to actually creep inside. So I've selected the outside, and I want to maybe expand that by maybe 3 pixels. Yeah, okay, that's pretty good. What I'm going to do is a content aware fill. So edit content aware fill. Okay, so it looks like we're going to get this kind of duplicating color, but that's, that's absolutely fine for this. All we want to do is get rid of the white, so that could be okay. So I'm going to save this as one up. This is going to be female stalker 01 albedo. So let's go back in to our material editor and just swap this texture with the newly created one. Okay, so quick way of just masking some of those problems. All right, still not great. Still not great at all. Will only work from certain angles, but it's better than it was for sure. Okay, let's see what the next step is here. I'm going to just smooth everything out here. Edit poly. Got those dead eyes staring at me. And let's just give that a smoothing group of 1. Okay, so the geometry is not beautiful, but again, for a background character, could be all that you need. So let's again move this character onto the origin. Here we go. And I'm going to bring this into Mixamo. Mixamo, if you don't know, is a kind of an automatic rigging and animation service. It's owned by Adobe. And once you have an Adobe account, you should be able to access it. So that's what we're going to use. And it just takes, again, this is for quick fixes, but a lot of the time it can get you out of a jam if you need animations in a hurry. So let's just center the pivot point up here. And we can go ahead and file export selected. Actually, now that I think about it, before we get there, there's a slight issue here in that the arms are welded to the side, and Mixamo kind of expects you to have an A pose or a T pose. So here's a little tip for getting around the limitations of Mixamo. If you've ever tried this and you haven't been able to get a good rig, it will, just kind of fail outright. Here's something that I do. So just creating a cylinder here. Something like that. And I'll create another one just by rotating it kind of 180 degrees. And it's not going to be joined to the mesh or anything like that. It's just going to sit there in space. So I'll select my 2 cylinders and my main character, and I'll export this as female stalker for Mixamo. And it's just going to be an FBX, and it's just geometry. Okay, so that is just done. So let's go on over to Mixamo and import the character. So here we are on Mixamo.com. All I need to do is log in. I think the Adobe account is free to use this. I'm not sure, but give it a shot anyway. And here we are in Mixamo. So basically on the left of the screen, you've got a library of pre-existing animations. And on the right-hand side, you've got a window with your 3D model and how it will react. So let's go ahead and over here to the right, upload character. Let's choose our FBX recently exported. And all that's required from you really when you're setting up Mixamo is to place the joints. Okay, so let's go next. Drag the chin over, and this is symmetrical, so pretty good. The wrists are going to go at the end of our cylinders here, as are the elbows. Knees are going to go in here, and then the groin is going to be about there. Okay, so let's hit next. And then it's usually pretty quick to go about assigning verts, so it's really useful for when you're in a kind of a testing phase like this to see what's going to work or what's not. And we have some animation. So as you can see, those kind of cartoonish cylinder arms have been appended, which is fine. Now for a character like this, we probably just want an idle, like the arms aren't separate from the body. So let's go ahead and search Mixamo for idle. Okay, that's naturalistic, but there's not a whole lot of movement in it. I would like a bit more. Injured idle could be good. It kind of suits the whole theme of the stalker in a post-apocalyptic kind of wasteland. So let's go ahead and download the FBX with skin and animation. So I'm going back to my scene in 3D Studio Max here. I'm going to save what I've done so far. And I'm going to just delete these out of the scene so I can keep the materials basically. So let's go ahead and go File, Import. Browse to your downloaded FBX. Defaults should be fine coming in. And then we have our animated character. Oh, I like how there's finger animation there as well, but it's no good to us because we don't have individual fingers. But of course, you can go ahead and you can delete these outlandish cylinders now at this point. And there is a little bit of fixing up on the mesh. You can see there's a lot of collapsing geometry in here, but that should be quick enough. What we're going to do is, because we don't have kind of separated arms, we can just skin this probably fairly crudely to the spine bones, and it should fix any compression that's going on there. You can see that it's quite hideous what's happening. So let's see if we can fix that up a little bit. So I'm going to go Edit Envelopes, Vertices. I'm going to want my paint tools. And what I want to paint is probably one of the spine bones. Spine 2, spine 1, and spine. Yeah, I think we want to take these ones. And if I start painting an absolute value on here, we should see that volume restored. This is very limited uses, but it is possible to get characters in T-poses out there and do a bit more with them. And there we have kind of an animated background character, very background character. Let's try and just put some lights in. I mean, we've got this kind of pre-lit and shaded character. Well, let's just go and see how some lights might behave here. Just go for kind of a classic hot and cold setup. We get that kind of moonlight rim light in behind there. So you do get the kind of benefit of it being a 3D model in that you can change how it's lit and affect that. So that is pretty much creating a character, 3D character using AI tools. So we had Midjourney for the concept, we had PIFuHD to take the concept and take it into 3D, and we had a modeler and a bit of Photoshop to take it and apply it as a texture. So your mileage will vary, you know, with PIFuHD, especially with the kind of more, I suppose, video gamey styles scenarios, post-apocalyptic scenarios and stuff like that. The further away you get from the kind of fashion photography stuff that it's trained on, the harder it is. And, you know, depending on what you're doing, I've had kind of 9 out of 10 images that looked okay coming out of Midjourney kind of fail on me completely. So it's worth experimenting with, though. So I hope this inspires you to give it a go. So as I was working on this, I thought it might be nice to have just a little bit of extra secondary animation in there, seeing as we are so limited with what we can actually do here with the arms being bound by the sides. And I thought it might be cool to have like a breathing tube that's connected to an unseen tank on her back that, you know, also is connected to via the gas mask. So let's have a look at how to do something like that very quickly. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a simple plane, really, and it's going to have to be kind of long enough to go all the way around the back. but I don't want it to be too complex. So I'm just going to add, say, 3 edge loops in there, and that's going to give us enough to work with. So let's position this sort of where it needs to be, and it's been quite crudely done. So I just want these 2 verts to kind of hang from one side of the gas mask here. Just pull that in there like that. And these verts here are going to, be connected to some sort of tank that we're not going to bother modeling up, or at least I'm not. And then these pieces here are going to act as the tube. Now this looks kind of particularly long, but it has to be long enough that it will go around the body properly. Put that in there. Just allow a little bit of clearance there. And here. So what we're going to do is we're going to simulate this plane when I add a few more subdivisions in there. And then we're going to add a shell modifier, which is going to solidify it basically and make a square tube, if you like. And then we can add a turbo smooth on and export it maybe via Alembic or something like that and see how it goes. Okay, so let's go ahead now and we can add a few more divisions in here. So I'm just going to try and keep that as regular as possible. Looks good. I think it's going to do us. So this will hang pretty low, but that's okay. Okay, so with that done, it's time to add the cloth modifier. So let's go ahead and add 3D Studio Max cloth. Go to object properties, and this will allow us to decide what's in our simulation basically. So plane 1 is going to be our tube, and we want that to be cloth. Then we can add objects and choose this default 001. This is the name of our mesh here, which probably should have been renamed before this. That's going to be a collision object. So when we've got plane selected, we can see it's cloth, and when we've got our mesh here selected, our character model, it's going to be a collision object. So hit OK. That's really all the collision setup that we need to do. So let's go into sub-object group here and select these top 2 verts here. And we are going to go make group, hit OK. And then we are going to add them onto, choose surface and add them to this surface. And that's going to keep those embedded in the surface while everything else simulates. So we need to do this on the back as well to stop it dropping down. Select these 2 verts, go to make group, hit OK. And again, let's do surface and click our object. And that should be it. All we really need to do is let this kind of drape and simulate for maybe 10 frames before the animation, just so it settles. Actually, let's give it 20 frames. So the start frame is going to be -20. And then the end frame, it's going to run to, what, 280? Okay, and we're going to want to use self-collision here as well. So let's try that out. Let's go ahead and just hit simulate. So the great thing about using a low poly model is that it's pretty quick to simulate. So what we have here is one end is connected to the gas mask, the other end is connected to a non-existent tank, and then you have the rest of the pieces in between it. All the other edges are being simulated and they're colliding with the model. So that's just going to give a nice bit of secondary animation, which may help to distract from the very limited creation that we have here. Cool, I think we're done. So let's now just play that back and check. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool. So, and it actually loops pretty well too, which I'm pretty happy about. So that's cool. So let's just thicken up this plane now, because obviously it's not going to cut the mustard like that. So let's add a shell modifier. And we should have some room to play with. A little on the inside and a little on the outside. Something like that. And then what we could do is we could turbo smooth that, and it will give us a kind of an 8-sided hose. That's pretty nice, I think. Okay. So to export vertex animation like this, it typically needs to be alembic unless there's bones in it. Sometimes you can do a point cache and export via FBX. I'm going to export this one here via alembic and just hope that everything will line up nicely. So let's go ahead, export selected. We're going to call this hose animation. Save it as an ABC, an alembic. Active time segment 0 to 280. Out it goes. And the reason I have exported that is just so that I can use it in something like Toolbag for a proper preview. So I'm going to jump on over into Toolbag now and go ahead and import that in. Okay, so here's the character. Got this kind of very simple scene set up. We've got two planes crisscrossing. One has asphalt from the material library and the other has this kind of worn concrete. So let's go ahead and hit File, Import Model, Animation, and it's the hose animation. That has landed in place there very nicely, and you can see as I scrub forward, or if I just do a simpler animation, you can see how it moves back and forth. And just kind of using what we have to do a little bit more with the scene. This, of course, needs some sort of texture. I haven't added UVs, but let's see if we've got maybe a rubber texture in the library. There's a dusty rubber one here that might be good. Okay, so the UVs are stretched on that, but we can fix it a little bit. Just to add some sort of detail on there. And that's pretty much it. That is our kind of wasteland character.